Well, hello friends and welcome back. Okay, now let's get into the herbs and ground covers and vines. In the other videos, we talked about the canopy layer, the understory layer, and the shrubs. So let's keep going. We're going from big towards smaller. Um, and we want to fill in our space. We really want to fill in all the space with something. Um, Here's a space between these shrubs. Okay, these are going to get bigger. This is blueberry here, Walter's viburnum. There's another blueberry, a really small tree there with the winged sumac, and this Fakahatchee grass will get a lot bigger. But there's a lot of space right in here. It's all messy looking right now because I've thrown all this mulch down. So, what am I looking at here? Between this blueberry and that blueberry right there, I've got enough space really for one more blueberry or one more shrub. I could choose to put a blueberry there and possibly two going that way. One here and one more over there. I've got some shrubs there, but those are dwarf Walter's viburnum, so they're not going to get as big as a normal Walter's viburnum. So yeah, that leaves me ample space in here for two more shrubs. But even after those two shrubs go in, there's still going to be space in here that could be filled with something, and that's where you want to go put in some herbs. Even this little spot here between this pot and this blueberry, yeah, over the years the blueberry will get bushier and denser and bigger and begin to grow all the way over here. It might even make it all the way to the edge of this pot. Probably not though, that's more than 3 feet, and typical blueberry plant's going to be about 5 feet wide. So that means 2.5 feet going one direction. So yeah, I've even got space right in here where I could plant an herb. Now, North Central Florida is too hot for a lot of the traditional herbs you think of in permaculture, food forest garden, you know, those temperate and perennial herbs. I'm talking about things like asparagus. It's very marginal. The further north you go in Florida, the more possible asparagus becomes, but the further you go towards Central Florida, it's really hot. Asparagus needs a cold winter to sort of reset things and come back again in the spring. You know, rhubarb, forget it. We're just way too warm. Horseradish, we're really way too warm here. Artichoke, it's not going to work here. Even comfrey is a lot of the comfrey is not going to work here. I like the Bocking 14 comfrey. We're just too hot here for that. It needs a cooler climate. There is just basically you know, wild comfrey, wild unimproved regular comfrey. If you grow that in a spot that gets morning sun and afternoon shade, and it's a pretty rich soil for Florida, and it gets plenty of moisture, you can grow. But if you try to grow comfrey in our Florida sand out in a hot sunny spot, it's not going to do that well. So what are we left with if we can't use all those traditional herbs? Well, there's a few things. You can go with the tropical leafy green type herbs. Let's look at those again right over here. You can go with all those tropical leafy greens, and we've covered a good half dozen of them or more. Here's a few right in here. Okinawa spinach and Brazilian spinach there, and there's several others. Or you can just plant annual herbs, leafy greens. Those are dependent on the season. A lot of those will grow best in the winter season here. I'm talking like mustard greens. And then, or you can plant the Mediterranean herbs used in cooking, the culinary herbs, right? So we're talking oregano, okay, and thyme, that sort of thing. So what I've chosen to do here is I'm growing a lot of the tropical leafy green herbs. They are perennial plants, but we can get cold enough here to knock them all the way to the ground. But we're probably not going to get cold enough to kill the roots. So here's again some Okinawa spinach and some longevity spinach. And you can see I'm covering the ground really dense and really nice large area. And this is only 2 plants. One Okinawa spinach, one longevity spinach. That's how much it spreads. This longevity spinach goes all the way from at least this tip right here, all the way across here, all the way. We're gonna keep going all the way to here. In fact, it goes way beyond that. Here's one that's gone way over here. So these cover a lot of ground. These are really great for the herb layer here. They'll fill in your space between your shrubs. And that's what you want to do with your herbs. You know, now that you've got your trees and your canopy, your understory, your shrubs, everything's in place. At first, they're not going to cover that much because they need to grow. But go ahead and get your herbs planted in between them and just let it all grow together and let it all fill in solid. And then you've got ground cover that you can also use. I think the best use of ground cover is 2 things, I guess. There's always going to be spaces. Here's some space in between these 2 pots. So I could get some frog fruit ground cover or some sunshine mimosa, perennial peanut. I could get something like that growing in there. We have this plant called buffalo clover. That's a good one too. That's a good ground cover here. So use the ground cover to fill in all those little spaces that are still left to be filled even after the herbs are in place. And then also use them to cover your paths, your pathways. My pathways are mostly still grass at this point. Although I do have an area back here where it's almost solid in frog fruit. Frog fruit's a wonderful ground cover. So starting right about in here, we've got a great deal of frog fruit. As we come through here, it just becomes just solid frog fruit all through here. I'm loving this. This is excellent. This is all frog fruit, all frog fruit. So my desire is to get frog fruit and some of these other ground covers taking over all my paths. And so it's all about just covering the ground with something, making sure you've got green plants growing everywhere. The more you've got going, the more you're collecting the sunlight and you know, converting it into biomass. The more sugars you got pumping into the ground, feeding that mycorrhizal network, the better it is for the whole food forest. And then the other area I wanted to cover was just a little bit about the vines. So our vines would be things like muscadine grape. Grows great here, grows a lot better than regular type of grapes like they grow in California, for example. Muscadine grapes grow much better in the south. They can handle our humidity. Grape is a high maintenance plant. You really have to prune away 90+% of the plant every year in January or so. You can trellis those, you can grow them on a fence. There was a bunch of native muscadine on this fence, but it's so aggressive, it was just trying to take over my whole garden over here on this side. So I've just cut it back. But muscadine grape, high maintenance, but there's some excellent cultivars that produce big, nice, tasty fruits. Some are better for eating raw, some are better for making wine. Let's see, maypop passion fruit, a nice native passion fruit vine, and then other passion fruits, purple passion fruit, they grow well here. Coral honeysuckle is a real nice vine. It's a Florida native, and you can grow it on your fence or on your trees or on trellises. You've got some wild vines like earleaf greenbrier. The tips, the tender tips of that are edible, and they do provide berries for birds in the deepest part of winter. So that's your vines. So this video is not that very long, really. It's just a quick summary. You know, once you get your other layers in, your trees and your shrubs, then you just want to fill in all the spaces as much as possible. First with your herb layer. Second with your ground cover, and then go ahead and put your vines in here and there. Some of the vines are really nice and tasty. I'm just looking at some spaces here. I've got a lot of space right here. As we covered in the other video, this loquat will get really big at some point, but here going towards the south from the loquat, this is a good spot. I've got a lot of sun coming into this spot right in front of this loquat here. So this is a really good spot that could grow something. And this is a big enough space all in here. I could put several blueberries and possibly. I could put the really small trees like I talked about in the other video, like a little pomegranate, a couple of pomegranate in there. I could certainly put a whole lot of herbs in here. And that's what I'm probably gonna do in a lot of these areas. By the way, this is some of that buffalo clover here. It's a nice little native, if not native, it's a naturalized plant. It's all over north central Florida. Yeah, I could put, I intend to do a lot of propagation of all those tropical leafy green herbs and just start filling in all these spaces with those. And I'm probably going to try to time that as far as lining up with the beginning of the wet season in June, because that's when they'll grow well. It'll be nice and warm for them, and the rains will help with the water. I won't have to water them so much. And those herbs will just take off in here and cover all this ground. And they will grow so aggressively that I can just plant them right in this grass, and the herbs will take over and actually shade out the grass and choke it out and cover it out. So that's a good way to use the tropical herbs here in Florida. Take advantage of the summer and the heat when they're growing really fast. Put them in here and let them grow. Here's a spot right here. This looks like a really good spot for a longevity spinach or a Okinawa spinach. Just let it take over this whole spot here between this little cherry tree and this Brazilian cherry tree and this blueberry back here. Just let that whole spot right there just get taken over. Maybe one Okinawa spinach right there, one longevity spinach right there, and this whole spot will just get completely covered by those and choke out all this grass. So in the meantime, go ahead and let your grass exist. You don't want to cover all this stuff up with too much mulch. The grass, it's not my long-term choice for these areas. I want those herbs instead. But for now, they serve a purpose. Let them grow tall, and that provides a lot of places for insects and wildlife to overwinter. And they are photosynthesizing and putting sugars into the ground. Some of them, like these weeds here, grew some flowers, and that helped with the pollinator support. Some of them are even nitrogen fixing plants, like these little weeds right here. So let your wild weeds work to your advantage. Let them grow some. Here's some wild ones this is called Biden's alba. Excellent pollinator support plant. Let these grow. I don't even know what a lot of these are even called. Here's some. They had some flowers, so they supported the bees and butterflies, pollinators. So let all your wild ground covers grow until you're ready to plant something in those spots. Once you're ready to plant something, put it in and mulch them a little bit. Here we provided mulch right around this loquat tree. And then, you know, try to help your valuable plants that you're putting in the ground. You don't want a bunch of stuff just covering them up and out competing them, so give them a little space around them by just clearing that out and mulching it. But other than that, let all this stuff grow. So I think that about covers it. By the time you've done all this, you've planted out everything. And so the next video, we're going to start talking about management. How do we manage the garden now that we've got everything planted in the ground in the way that we want? And by the way, we're nowhere near all planted out here. I've been able to show you a whole lot of examples of plants. This section up here is mostly planted out. I'm going to add some more. I'm going to add some more herbs up in here, though. You know, you take it like this right here. There's a good spot right there where those banana leaves are. Or I can put in another herb like a, you know, something like an Okinawa spinach like that. These cannas are all going to grow up and fill in this space. But, and a lot of these are going to fill in this whole space right here, this blueberries. But see, there's a flag right there. So I'm planning on putting something right there. It might be a fire bush or some kind of a shrub like that. But even after that, I could probably put in some of the herbs in these areas right here. So once you get everything all planted out, and for me, it's going to take a few years, and I'm such a plant collector that I will always be interested in planting new and interesting plants somewhere in the garden. And with the space as big as I've got here, I'm fortunate to have a space that allows me to, you know, to be a plant collector. I'm a plant addict, so I'm always going to have a spot where I can put an interesting plant, I'm pretty sure, somewhere in this garden. But that's the goal, is over time you want to get it filled more and more and more with plants and mulch, and then it'll just grow and reward you with food and with habitat for your wildlife. Okay, that's it. We're going to start talking about management practices in the next one. All right, y'all, take care now.